And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to HR Leaders Live. It's been a while since we've done a live show. So welcome back. If you're new here, this is a show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives and the world's leading global brands. Today, I've got two of my besties. They've not agreed that they're my besties, but I'm going to say that they're my besties. On the show today, we're joined by the man, the myth, the legend. That is Dave Ulrich, who's a speaker, author, thought partner on human capability, and co-founder at the RBL Group. And we've got the amazing Beverley Kaye, who's an international speaker, thought leader, and author of the best-selling book, Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, Getting Good People to Stay, which has sold over 800,000 copies, which I can't even, that number is just way too big. But welcome, friends. How are you both?
Great to see you, Chris and Matt. Good to see you.
Oh, Matt, you made it. So Matt messaged me a second ago saying he's doing an update and he appeared. So, hey, Matt, how are you? You made it, my friend. Can you hear us? Yes, amazing. And we've got Matt because he just appeared out of nowhere, who's my partner in crime, co-host of the shows. And everyone knows you by now, Matt. You always make me look bad because I can't grow a beard and you can grow a beard. We'll get over it. It's fine. But today, we've got a really exciting conversation. We're going to be talking about the 7 lessons for managing people in a recession. And this was really inspired by Dave's recent article on LinkedIn, which we'll link in the chat. So go check that out. Dave, I thought it'd be great. Could you kind of set the context for us and also why you decided to write this article? And then we can jump into the conversation.
First of all, thanks for inviting and welcome to those who are logging in. And we hope you'll follow us. You know, it's interesting. Economies go up and down. We've been through the pandemic. We've been through the endemic of the emotional challenge. Now we're hearing a lot about recession and downsizing. And what I see is a lot of companies are saying, wow, this is brand new. Well, there are a few of us on this call who've been around for a while, maybe a long while. And we know there are lessons learned. And so I went back and Bev went back and said, what do we know about managing in tough times? Because they're inevitable. And we pulled out a couple and shared some of that. It's gotten a lot of attention. And so our job is to say, how do you seize the opportunity, not only in good times, but in bad times, so that we manage our employees and organizations as well as possible?
Love that. So I thought, I doubt we were going to get through all 7, but we'll do our best today. So I thought I'd just start with number 1, Dave, because during our first chat, that one really stood out to me because, you know, seize opportunity is the number 1 of 7. And I saw the quote from Stanford economist Paul Roper, who said, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And I think that really personally resonated with me because we were in a position as a business, as you know, and most of our listeners know, that we were a couple of months away from going out of business during the pandemic. You know, we were a face-to-face organization and 90% of our revenue was physical, in person. And you mentioned during the article that you kind of need that strategic reinvention during a recession. And it reminded me that we had to look internally at what skills we had at HR leaders in order to pivot the business. And it was by doing that that we discovered that Ivan, who's actually producing the show today backstage, had an amazing skill set of live streaming. And we had other members of the team that enjoyed video editing that we had no idea. And we realized that by looking internally at what skills that we had, we could kind of reshape the business for that new kind of environment that we found ourselves in. And it wasn't easy by any means, but we also saw that while sort of our competitors were closing down and furloughing, it could be a very unique opportunity for HR leaders to step forward and actually reinvent ourselves. And we not to sound arrogant, but we went from, 3 months of payroll before we went out of business to almost 10xing our revenue during that time. So I think it's a good example of, if you look, you can look internally, see what skills exist. And I think companies constantly need to do this. You shouldn't wait until a pandemic happens until you start doing this. Now we do this often and try and figure out what are the hobbies and passions that people have that actually they can come into the business. And that's led us to where we are now. We wouldn't actually be on this call right now with Dave and with Bev and with Matt if we didn't do that. So when I first looked, Dave, at that first of the 7 lessons, seizing opportunity, it really resonated with me.
Let me just, Chris, why are we even on the show? You should just tell your story. I think you're going to become a Harvard case study.
Yeah.
Let me tell an experience that my wife taught me. She's a very good psychologist. She loves in a class to say, think of a time where you had a failure. And we've all got them, whatever they are. How did you feel at the time? Despondent, depressed, discouraged. I've had them, you've had them. What did you learn from that? And the message is, out of those failures, and this is Carol Dweck, failure is an opportunity to learn. Out of the personal failures, for me, are the greatest lessons in my life. And you just described that with organizations. Out of the challenges, we emerge stronger.
Yeah.
And I love your case study. It should be a Harvard case study. But I think we've all faced that at a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Bev's had any failures, but I have had some colossal failures.
Right.
And I go back and I realize that's where I learn the most.
100%.
And so if you're listening to this and people don't get it, just ask them, when did you fail? What did you learn? How critical was that?
Mm-hmm.
That's the agenda.
And just to build on that, here's an idea. I come in part from the world of career, and people leave organizations because they don't see a path for themselves. And I have been talking for years about people being either opportunity minded or opportunity blinded. So a reshuffle happens. The opportunity minded people say, great, I'm going to Google that new guy and the opportunity blinded people say, oh, woe is me. It happened again. And I think, I've written about it and I say some people seek opportunities. They look and they keep aware of them, but they don't see what applies to them. Others seek and say, oh, that means me, but it stops there. They don't seize the opportunity. So I think they're all over, Dave, and they're like running by our eyeballs or our ears or whatever.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good point. And actually, I have a question that segues beautifully into Chris's Harvard study, Dave's point, as well as Bev's point. I think it's when you have the opportunity to crowdsource the solutions from the people around you in your organization, that's a wonderful fountain of knowledge. Your employees have such a wealth of knowledge about your business, about your culture, your customer base that they can draw upon to innovate. And I'm curious, both Dave and Bev, if you have examples from your background or experiences where you've seen organizations do this really well, where they've crowdsourced the solutions to very real problems from within their employee base.
We were working in a plant. It happened to be in Ireland in a recession, and whichever it could be late yesterday or 5 years ago. They had to cut costs 10%, and that's a reality. So instead of saying, "Oh, here's the solution," they went to the employees, and they said, "What do you think?" By the way, their first answer was all the executives should take a 20% pay cut. So, and the executives did.
Oh, great!
Because that is appropriate. That the executives have more latitude. But they said, we're going to do a 9-day fortnight. Everybody's going to work 10 days and get paid for 9. Now, the executives took a deeper cut. They solved the problem. We're also going to manage some of the other costs. So I think opening what we called it, and it was our second tip, share experiences, create an ecosystem, and I love what you said, Matt, crowdsource the problem. And you may find solutions that the executives never even thought of.
And I want to say, and Matt knows this as well, is it was probably one of the most difficult moments of my career to walk in that room as a CEO, as a friend, to say to all of the team that I don't know what we're going to do. And it was tough because everyone was looking at me saying, what are we going to do, Chris? And I had to, I don't know, but together we're going to figure it out. And I gave the team the option. Do you want us to furlough and we wait it out? Or do you want to come up with something new? And they chose, let's run into this, Chris, and figure out how we're going to do it. And then together, as you said, we crowdsourced the ideas and the technology and everything along the way. And so, and I want to say that one of the things that came out of that as well, I can't even explain it in words, to be honest, the bond that builds with each other when you go through that shared experience as a team is, it's just hard to put into words. Everyone stepped up. Everyone, went above and beyond. And when we came out the other end, it was still challenging, and still it kind of builds that unity and that glue, that stickiness that you can't buy. So yeah.
And you know, if I could give any manager, anybody in the audience, one big tip, it's one word with 3 letters, and it's ask. And maybe the best thing for a leader is to the note, have I asked today? Anything. How are you? You don't look happy. You know, what's going on? And then wait for the answer and don't move to the next topic. Drill down a little deeper on the answer. So ask, ask, ask. I think it's the answer to everything. Ask more.
You know, Matt, let me give an example of that. And Bev, that is such a good idea. Another plant happened to be in the United States. They're going to close down. And this gets into the third tip, which is, and I should have named the second tip crowdsource. You've improved my article already. And it's over communicate. Sometimes you do have to make tough decisions. I think sometimes we are Pollyanna. No, you do have to make tough decisions. What this team did is the 10 executives flew into a plant, and on the night, day one, they shared with all the employees, a couple of hundred, what was happening. They had to close. Next day, 10 offices. Any employee could meet with any executive one-on-one. And they spent the day listening. That's ask. Not only ask, but I might add to that, listen. Listen. That evening, day 2, the executives got together and they came up with a solution. And day 3 in the morning, they came back to the employees and said, we heard you. Here's some things we haven't thought about. The employees didn't like it because they were losing their jobs, many of them, but they gave them a standing ovation. They said, you listened. And even in a time that's tough. So, and again, that's pretty extreme because this is a company that had incredible shared values and they still had to let people go, but they did it in a way that the employees felt we've been heard. Look at that. 8 hours. Any employee can go to any executive and have a one-on-one. And again, I've given the example. Again, those listening, you're bright enough to tweak it and do it in your way. But Bev, that idea, ask, listen, over-communicate. And today with technology, that doesn't always have to be in person. I mean, that could be through other kinds of technology. We've learned with Matt today that it's so easy to log on.
I love it. And ask at home too. You know, ask kids, you know, when we researched that led to Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, we asked thousands of people, not why do you leave, but why do you stay? And that's where that word ask came out. Like I was asked. And it just was all the way through all of the research. Everything depended on ask. So
you know, I would compliment that, Chris, and it gets into the communicate. Bev, I love the idea of ask. It's what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And so my experience with leaders, somebody comes to you with a problem as a leader. They've thought about it more than you have. And so instead of you're giving the solution, which, you know, you're with your genius and try to, oh, I'm so smart, say, what do you think? And their solution may not be fair. I'm not going to be naive about that. Sometimes what they thought doesn't work. But what do you think?
No,
that's the ask. And it's so nice.
Because sometimes also I've learned as a leader, you can rob them of that opportunity of learning by giving the solution or jumping in. You rob them of that opportunity for them to actually go through that process. Just because I have the answer doesn't mean, or again, we all assume we even know the answer. That's already the first mistake that we have. But I realized that in the past I would rob them the opportunity of being able to go through that. Bev, I want to jump in here. What are some practical things that we can do for those that stay? What are some practical things that managers, leaders can do?
So my saddest moment is that I didn't trademark the stay interview because we talked about it 25 years ago. And it's really about, you know how we got there. We followed people who left one org and moved to the next one with their exit interview in hand. And we said, you said, da, 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 da. What didn't you say? And most of those employees said, my boss was a jerk and I could not take it anymore. And then as good interviewers, we said, can you give us an example of what a jerk is? And they gave us 55 jerkatudinal characteristics. And so I think around staying, maybe here's a way out idea. Maybe you say to employee, what am I not doing? What do you want me to do more of? And maybe that the knee-jerk answer can change the whole relationship. Because when we say, what can I do to keep you? It's at the exit interview.
Yeah.
And it's too late. So
let me just say to everyone I know, go get Bev's book. I recommend it everywhere, because by the time you get to the stay interview, it's too late, because people have already psychologically distracted. Mm-hmm. You want to go to people before they get those offers. And her book just is so good. And Bev, you've done just a brilliant job. You've got a high performing employee. Of course, they're going to get offers. Assume that you want them to get offers. Right. And if you go to them, what's it going to take to keep you? Let's engage. What a great idea, Bev, that I've recommended so many times. Just a great idea.
It's one of those pieces that stands the test of time because it's relevant regardless of industry, of geography, of recency. There's just so many beautiful things in that. One of the modalities we've often leveraged in my business, but certainly in past organizations, is this idea of start, stop, continue. What should we start? What should we stop? What should we continue? And Bev hit on it perfectly a quarter century ago and talking about the importance of those elements and just connecting with your employees at a realistic level. I think we're all as leaders guilty at times of expecting from ourselves perfection and that people go to us for answers. But the reality is we're imperfect and flawed humans like everybody else. And we oftentimes don't have answers to questions. So I think the opportunity to show some vulnerability, to remove any hierarchies that may exist artificially, or even in some cases that are more deeply entrenched, is an opportunity for us to really, again, crowdsource and be more collaborative at a time when we need solutions. We don't need titles.
Right. And the other great question, the other great thing to say is, I don't know. Can you imagine an employee hearing their boss say, I don't know? Like, good on you.
Yes, it's funny because my whole career you're taught not to do that.
Yeah.
You're taught as a manager, as a leader, you should have all the answers, etc. But what I realize is that my job is to get out of the way and empower other people to make decisions. And you mentioned about stop doing things. Ivan and the team recently had, said to me, Chris, can we stop doing all these new things and figure out, should we stop these things first? Because they're no longer serving us. And that's something I kind of learned from Ivan. Always brings that up. He knows in the background he's listening right now in a meeting. He always does that. It's like, before we go down this route, Chris, and your crazy new idea, maybe we should stop doing these things. He's nodding. Get him in there. But it's such a one of the things that you said, Bev, when we was preparing for this, you wrote a little note next to our to attend to those that leave, and you wrote, "Let's let the great comeback begin."
Yeah.
I want to stop on that for a second, because many of my friends were let go in the pandemic of their roles, for obvious reasons. And those companies that really did do it right, they went back.
They did. They boomeranged back.
Yeah, they went back. And so it's just a testament to those organizations that did actually take a moment to care and actually have those conversations and spend all those hours like they described with those executives and sat down with those. I guarantee you, if they went back to those employees that they described, they would go back to work for that business.
So here's what I think, I wrote about in that article. I think people who've been laid off are going to come back. If some to the same organization, some to others. But I think managers have to know people come back in one of three ways. They come back burning. I can't wait to get back and be with my colleagues, etc. Find out what they're burning, what they want. Or they come back churning. I don't know that I want to go back to the old way. What makes you hesitant? or they come back yearning for something different.
Mm.
And so there's a whole series of questions a good manager can ask to know which category, because once they come back, I want to keep them, and
Love that.
that's critical.
Chris, I loved your question about what do we do with those who stay. I've heard one, crowdsource, Matt. That is a great idea. Two, I think one of the messages that I'm hearing is ask people, what do you want? I think one of the takeaways from the last few years is the personalization of work, the employee value proposition. What can I do with and for you that works for you?
Yes.
That may be working at home, it may be in an office, it may be full-time, it may be part-time. But what do you want? And then have a dialogue about how to do that. Third, I think you've got to clean up the work process. If you take out 20% of the work and you take out 20%, or you take out 20% of the people, you got to take out 20% of the work. Otherwise, you punish the 80% who stay. So use that as an opportunity to say, are there reports, approvals, processes? And then this is where, Matt, crowdsourcing is so great. What stupid things are we doing? And we've worked with a lot of companies. This is an excuse to clean up some of that stuff. The fourth one I love with a leader is help me understand. I love the I don't know, but help me understand why you're feeling. Help me understand so that we engage in that discussion. So crowdsource, personalize, clean up the work, help me understand, engage. What great tips. And Bev, I love your three, burning, churning, and yearning for those who come back. The research shows when people get hired the second time, and you can't bring them back at a big salary increase. You can't create a career path outside the company. You can't say, gee, I got a 50% raise going to work for Chris because he's so generous. Ivan told me to say that because he is so generous. They can't come back. They got to come back at a reasonable career.
Mm-hmm.
But when they do, they stay, and then they send a message to those who stay. So
isn't it funny? We're talking about basic communication, and I'll just give you one idea. So I'm married to a rocket scientist, my absolute opposite. And I've been trying for almost 50 years to get him to listen to me. I've tried every listening technique. I finally said to him, when I ask you something or tell you something, listen for the blinking word. That pretend that out of my mouth comes a cartoon, little cloud, and in it are words. One of those words is going to blink to you. Just say, Bev, say more about that. What did you mean by that? Then I feel listened to, and you didn't have to do any work. Just ask me about any word that blinks. And if it's the wrong word, I'll say, well, I didn't really mean that. What I meant was X.
Mm-hmm.
So Bev, I'm blinking and taking notes.
Oh, good.
Good. You're opportunity minded. You've got to ask, and you've got to burn, yearn, and churn.
Yeah.
So I've got, I am blinking on your words.
Right,
so
right. Thank you. I grew up rhyming. So everything rhymes.
It's lucky you're married to a rocket scientist. I'm married to a psychologist who writes books on healing. And I'm going to make a confession live. In a lot of her books, I show up with psychological problems. Sometimes I'm a 15-year-old girl. Sometimes I'm an 80-year-old man. But if you look at Wendy's books, I'm in many of those books in all forms and all shapes. And anyway, I shouldn't have shared that live.
We're gonna all be searching like, where's Ulrich now? We're gonna find him in the books.
Well, I think it's a really good point, Chris, because I think we're talking about, as Bev mentioned, basic communication, but we're also talking about things that are anchored in basic psychology. This is science. This is time and time again have been proven. When we talk about, Dave, the reduction of the workforce by 20%, reducing the work, there's also a phenomenon around those who stay around this idea of survivor syndrome, those that remain in the organization feeling a sense of guilt, a sense of why wasn't it me, a sense of loss with their people around them. And those bonds are very hard to break because, especially in a case of a recession, there is no blame to attribute to those who've left. This is simply a matter of extraneous, often macroeconomic circumstances. It's not that Matt didn't perform, so Matt needs to leave, and people are thankful that Matt, it's addition by subtraction. This is a situation where, under no fault of his own, the workforce needs to make some tough decisions. And oftentimes it comes down to things like tenure, or things like whether that role or that team makes sense on a go forward basis, to Chris's point. So I think I wanted to stress the fact this is basic and it's anchored in very real science. So it's folks need to understand that this is something we should be working towards. This is not aspirational woo-woo type thinking. This is very much evidence-based clinical research that supports how organizations can operate and be more healthy and be more productive on a go-forward basis.
Right.
I think
So
that is. Yep.
if you
Go
won't
ahead,
make
Bev.
fun of me, can I tell one more rhymey thing?
Please.
That because I've been looking at what I call the kept on workforce. And the kept on workforce, there's 3 types of people. There's POBOs, who are pushed out but better off. Most of them find something later. So let's not worry about that. Then there are SOBOs. They are staying on but building options. In other words, you're not going to have them for long. They're looking around inside and outside. And then you've got a group I call hobos, and they're hanging on but bummed out. Negative energy, and it's spreading. So I think managers have to recognize the difference and take care of those 2 groups because they're precious talent. And
Bev, that's a form of that personalization.
yeah, yes.
When you say POBOs, POBO, I had another P word that came to mind that was not quite as generous.
Keep in mind we're live on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Dave.
I know, and I'll let people envision that P word.
Okay.
I love it. One of the things that strikes me is, one, be bold as a leader. You're facing tough decisions. Putting it off, you lose your credibility. 2 thoughts on that. One, I hear some leaders saying, "Oh, HR, you go let people go." No. What HR says to Matt, if Matt's the leader, Matt, you're the leader. We have to let people go. I'm going to help you do it in a way that people feel better about themselves. If I step in, you lose your credibility. So to the HR professionals, make sure that our job is to make them feel good. And the second hit is, I've written, and I love, Matt, your idea, research, experiment. Adam Grant has just been saying leadership is about experimental research. It's a great line. Here's my simple takeaway. The job of a leader is to make sure people leave the experience feeling better about themselves. So how do I take that employee in in a good conversation? It's easy. Chris, congratulations. You're great. Yeah. Ivan got that. Ivan, you deserve that 50% bonus. That's twice I've said that. You deserve it and you feel good and Ivan feels good. But what if you have a tough conversation?
Yeah.
I think leaders have to be able to have crucial conversations and people have to leave feeling better. That's where you go back. Let me help you understand. I care about you. I want you to succeed. And I love, Bev, your options. Do they stay? Do they go? And wherever they are, can we help those employees have a better experience in whatever job they have?
Right.
Yeah, we had a couple of comments I want to bring in. So John said, when we were talking about earlier about always follow I don't know with let's find out.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. And then Bass said, he's got a question for all of you. He said, do you think that long-term incentives still have the same staying power that they used to in the past?
Let me start with that, and then Bev will give us something that rhymes to solve it.
Yeah.
Incentives work, no question. What we've learned in managing change is don't start with the incentive system. It's too complex. It's got so many variables: long-term, short-term, base, bonus. Start with the behavior change. What's the behavior you need to demonstrate? More of, less of, stop, start, continue. Find a simple topology. Once people start behaving in a different way, leaders act with more empathy today. That's one of the behaviors we're seeing. Then build an incentive system that reinforces it. And I use incentives as reinforcement, not the initial behavior change. That's the simple suggestion I'd make.
Got any rhymes, Bev?
I did have one, just went out of my head, but I'll remember it. But I would say the biggest incentive, I want to say, is love. But if you don't use the word, you're not comfortable with it, any other word you'd put in there works. You know, I notice you, I see you, I appreciate you. I think that's the biggest incentive. And everybody's written about it forever. There's another thing, Dave, that forever we've talked about that, and we're still saying the same thing.
Let me give an example, Bev, of how valuable. I said earlier, have a difficult conversation and leave feeling better. I was coaching a leader, big company, top job, and an employee made an egregious mistake that was very serious. This leader was ready to hammer the employee. You made a mistake. It's costing us millions. If you don't fix it, you're fired. Once in a while, as a coach, you get to intervene. You don't get to do that all the time. I said, I'm going to change 3 phrases. Number 1, I care about you. Bev, that's love. However you say, I care about you. Number 2, you have great potential at this company. And then say, you made a huge mistake. It's going to cost us a lot of money. Do not hide from the challenge. And then number 3, what did we learn, you and I, that we'll improve on?
Right.
That leader had that conversation with the employee and called back a couple of days later and said, wow, that went better. And I'm going, again, Matt, I'm with you. I go, duh.
Right.
And yet we get locked in these crises that we fall back into recidivism. I can't say the word. And our job is to help leaders. I care about you. Love. You have great potential, your future. You made a mistake. What are we going to learn? Anyway, some
And
simple guides.
if you made a mistake and it costs me a lot of money and you're a great employee, it's the best money I ever lost.
Great line.
Now, wouldn't that be a great thing for a leader to say?
So I know our time is running. Chris, you always ask us to summarize. What did we hear? And Matt, you knew I was going to ask you a question. Chris, what did you hear in this discussion? And I'm doing this because Ivan sent me a note.
You hate me.
What did you and Matt hear? I mean, Bev and I have played in this space for so long and learning. What did you hear? As your experience was great, what did you hear that our listeners?
Interested.
Yeah.
Whilst you were talking, I was just personally reflecting on my own leadership, to be honest.
Nice.
While you were saying that, I was thinking of some conversations I could have handled a lot better recently that I've had if I would have had a Dave on my shoulder at the time. I think one of the reflections I've had is that we do need to give our leaders more support. All of these things we're talking about, yes, we're saying it's just human psychology, and we've been talking about this forever, but we've got to realize as well that we're asking so much of our leaders now. So we do need to help and support them with these things. Yes, it may be easy and there may be a 3-step process, but you're asking me to do that whilst juggling these balls over here, whilst I'm trying to deliver here, and then going into having one of those conversations, because that's how I was reflecting on it. So one of my reflections is, yes, I agree with all of you, but also at the same time, we need to make sure we support our leaders. And I think that's the role of one of the big roles of HR, that everyone listening today, that they can go and do that. So I'm excited for the future. And I'm excited that we're in this space. One thing I did want to touch on, Dave, before I let you go, because I'll be frustrated if I didn't. You mentioned earlier, briefly, you touched on the seventh lesson, which was redesigning work. I do want to touch on that second, because I do see companies redesigning work at the moment and letting go of a big part of their workforce at the same time. And then, and you mentioned briefly, for example, it's now increasing those remaining employees' work by 25% or more. What are some of the considerations and some of the things that companies need to be thinking about? I do want to just answer that question, because I see so many companies that are going through that right now, and they're not thinking about the knock-on effect of how they're redesigning work.
There's 2 or 3 levels of that. And I loved Matt's summary as well, because I took notes on what you said, Chris. Thank you. That reflection was helpful. But one is, often work is around, and we're going to be very concrete. We've done this in companies, reports that we fill out that nobody reads. Approvals. We found that when you have more than 4 names on an approval, you get less value. Often you have 20 names because it's a big thing. Well, the first people approve because it's a big thing. The last people approve because 18 people signed it. Reports, approvals, meetings. Are we doing stupid meetings? Metrics. Do we have tracking and metrics that don't add any value? Policies, procedures. Look at those bureaucratic mechanisms and ask the employees, what's stupid here? I mean, you can find more elegant ways of saying it. What are the institutional mechanisms that are dysfunctional? What's stupid? Reports, approvals. Get rid of that. The other, Chris, is using technology. I'm still learning it. I acknowledge it, that I think technology and digital is going to change the ways we begin to work and how we can streamline. Chat GPT. We're going to be able to use technology in ways that processes information and takes away the administrative bureaucratic work. In HR, you shouldn't be doing job descriptions about the past. You should be using GPT to do the draft. Now, GPT, Chat GPT, and others are very limited. That's a whole other conversation because they only look back. They don't look forward. They don't create. They don't have the human creativity. But get technology to remove some of those administrative burdens, and we'll see more of that. Yeah, I'll stop with those two.
I was going to congratulate us for getting through a whole podcast without mentioning Chat GPT, and then Dave blew that whole thing out of the water. But honestly, what I was going to say, Dave, to answer your question around summarization, and then I'll leave it to Ben for the final word. I think for me, it's about intentionality. It's about pairing the strategy with the use case. And whether it's Chat GPT because we want to reduce the mundane, repetitive administration in an organization, or whether it's taking 15 minutes before a tough meeting with a colleague to get grounded, to get mindful, so that you can show up as a leader, both those things can be possible. And in this world where we're trying to do things faster, cheaper, and in a more compelling way, sometimes the best remedy for all this is to slow down and remember that we're all human beings. We're all on this journey. We're all imperfect. And that I have this, maybe it's a bias that I carry with me, but I refuse to accept anything other than most people get up in the morning and they want to do good work and they want to contribute and they want to support each other. And sometimes things go sideways, but we have to remember that people are people. And what we're talking about here are human beings and organizations. Just because we're talking about laying off tens or dozens or hundreds of people, these are individuals with families and lives and challenges and hopes and dreams. And we can't lose sight of the humanity in all of this.
Right. And, you know, when I looked at your number 7, redesign work, what hit me was work is being redesigned because employees have a stronger voice. They are saying, you're not the boss of me. I'm going to tell you what I want. And that stronger voice is cutting out a lot of the fear of speaking up. And I think that's one positive outcome of this whole pandemic, etc.
Yeah. Well, listen, I feel like we could do round 2.
I know you're going to end. I'm going to give one quick comment at the end. I'd love to ask people at the end of this kind of discussion, we could do round 2, 3, and 4, and you will. The beauty is, Chris, I encourage people to join HR Leaders Live. You and Matt have done such a good job, and I love watching your work on LinkedIn. I love watching the videos you've done. I like to ask people, what was the best year of your life? It's a fun question around Matt. I love intentionality. I think that's good. The year I got married, the year I graduated, the year my daughter was born, the year of the year. I think they're all wrong. Here's what I hope people leave with. The best year of my life is the next one. And if that's the mindset, that intentionality then, Matt, is an agenda. And again, I've circled, that was one of Bev's shining words at her spouse. I got my shining word. I think that the best year of my life is what's next. I think that mindset helps us love from the past and the paper is what have we done, but create our future. Anyway, that's my last message.
I have a message to top that one. I love, because I wrote a book called Love 'Em, I love starting with asking everyone in the audience to answer the question, when was the last time you said, I love this work? Who were you with? What were you doing? What was the context? And when I used to do live stuff, not as much anymore, I could look at an audience and their eyeballs. And either I could see who is stretching all the way back or who it just happened the other day. So everyone in the audience, your audience, should name the thing that they would name. So
Love
Chris,
that.
you
Put that in the chat. We're going to see him in the chat. So wherever you're listening right now, LinkedIn, YouTube, Crowdcast, wherever you are, leave those messages in the chat. We'd love to hear that.
Would be great.
Yeah, and if we could ask one thing from everyone today, just hit that share button, tag in some colleagues, managers, friends, family that you feel that would benefit from listening. Also, make sure you go and follow Bev and Dave on LinkedIn, and Matt as well. I know you're already following most of them already. Dave's actually just released his new newsletter. 40,000 subscribers in one day. Shout out to you there, Dave. Bev's one's coming soon, Bev, right? We're gonna Bev's newsletter is coming soon, so make sure you subscribe to their newsletters and follow them there. Also, when you're on Dave's profile and Bev's profile, make sure you hit that new button. There's a little bell icon on LinkedIn now. It's a new feature that many of you don't know about, and it will make sure that it sends you a message whenever they post. So make sure you click that button and you'll be notified. Dave and Bev are very prolific in terms of posting, so do that. And as always, like, comment, and share on the HR Leaders page. Go and follow Matt, BentoHR. And yeah, we appreciate you all tuning in on this Friday morning or afternoon, depending where you are. And we'll see you again soon. But thanks, Dave. Thanks, Bev. Thanks, Matt. We'll see you all soon. Bye, everyone.
You need to update your browser for a new Chrome edition for Social Live. And I'm like, no.